everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. Today I'm going to rant on the fact that soldered-in SSDs are a cancer upon computing and why I think it is a bad idea that this was ever implemented. In a smartphone, you really need this thing to be ultra thin. It fits in your pocket. I understand the idea of soldering on the main storage, particularly since a smartphone on average is just not a device where you're going to be expecting to have 50 or 70 terabytes of write cycles like you would to, I don't know, a computer that's designed to be used for high-end video editing and graphics and video production and everything else. If you have a computer that is marketed to people as something that is going to be used in this way, you should expect that it's going to get a lot of write cycles to it in the way that a smartphone won't, which means that it may die. Further, since the computer costs a lot more than a smartphone, having to replace the entire thing because the SSD died is far more offensive in a $3,000 or $4,000 computer than it is on a $500 or $600 smartphone. A SSD, the solid-state drive, the NAND is a wear part. It's not the same as RAM or a CPU. Again, you can expect the CPU to keep on trucking along for 20 or 30 years. Sometimes RAM can keep trucking along for 20 or 30 years. An SSD that you're writing to regularly, it really is more of a wear part that you can expect if you're writing to it every single day a lot for 5 years. You've used up a good portion of that's life, if not the entirety of its life, depending on the quality of the parts used and how much writing you are actually doing to it. So soldering in that part versus using an M.2 SSD, which is very, very slim and allows you to build a really, really thin computer compared to what you could build 15 or 20 years ago with storage technology, in my opinion, is just a crying shame. Now, one of the problems that I have with the way these machines are designed, particularly the A1990 and A2141, is they're designed in this way where when the NAND fails, when the SSD fails, you have a paperweight. With the A1706 and A1707, if the SSD failed, whatever, fine, you get a question mark folder, you hold down the option key, you boot into your Ubuntu Live CD, or you boot into a backup you made, a clone you made of your drive, so you can have an external SSD, USB-C to SATA connection, and you can just boot into the clone that you made of the drive that was on your device, so you still can boot into the Mac operating system, you could still do your work. Yeah, you're gonna look kind of stupid with an SSD duct taped to the back of your monitor of your laptop, but you could still work. With these newer ones, it's very interesting because the way it works, the way the T2 and all the boot up shit works, essentially it needs the NAND to actually function. If the NAND doesn't function, it's not going to complete the boot up process properly and it's going to do weird stuff. It may boot up for 20 to 40 seconds and then turn off, or my personal favorite is when the NAND fails by shorting to ground. Many of these fail by shorting to ground entirely, not just like a dead SSD where the data went poof. I mean where the actual NAND chips fail and bring down the power line completely because there is a 6 to 0 ohm short to ground on the NAND's main power line. When this happens, the main power line of the computer is also shorted to ground because the main power line of the computer, PP-G3 hot, is directly powering the 2.5 volt line that powers the SSD, which means that you have a computer that you literally can't even turn on anymore when your SSD fails. Your computer doesn't turn on. Again, it's one thing to have a computer where the SSD fails, you lost your data, you have to duct tape an SSD to the back of your computer like a dinkus to have a laptop that works again so you could use an SSD externally. But to have it where it shorts to ground, and when it shorts to ground, the machine doesn't even turn off power to that rail. It can't even detect, oh, there's a 0 ohm short there. How about we cut that off so that the rest of the computer can work? No, we don't have any of that. So you have a computer that is essentially a doorstop. A $3,000 device that is now a doorstop. Now, many of you may ask, well, Lewis, you have fancy soldering equipment here. What's the point of having a hot air station and all this stuff and all these employees and all these parts and everything if you're not able to replace the SSD? You're not a real repairman. It's kind of late at night, so my analogy is maybe failing me at the moment, but I want you to imagine it like the difference between a jacket and underwear. If it's really cold outside, if you weren't expecting it to be 20 degrees because it was 70 yesterday, kind of typical to some of the weather in this part of the country sometimes. If you weren't expecting it to be 20 degrees and your friend says, you know, you can borrow my jacket. I haven't washed it in a week, but you can borrow my jacket. A lot of people would be okay with that so that they could walk outside. However, if your friend says, oh, you know, you can borrow my underwear, you can borrow my boxers, I haven't washed them in a week, you're probably not going to borrow them. Some parts are parts where I have absolutely no problem grabbing them off a donor board. An ISL 6259, fine grabbing it off a donor board. A backlight chip, fine grabbing that off a donor board. A NAND, I'm not. A 2011 MacBook Pro with a GPU? No, because that really is more of a wear part. On an 820-2915 board, that GPU is kind of a wear part. It's going to be dead after a few years, if not 1 year, and when it gets hot over and over and over again, it's one of those things where I just cannot trust that it's going to work very long going forward. An LED backlit screen? Yeah, I'll reuse a used one. A fluorescent backlit screen from 2008? No, I'm not going to reuse that because that fluorescent backlight has a finite lifespan that is much more finite than many of the other components. I'm not going to go over to a donor board where I don't know the history of it. I don't know why that board is here. I don't know why it's dead. And grab the NANDs off of that may have had 70 terabytes of write cycles to them and place those on a customer's board. Those are the same NANDs that suck so much that they're failing to this extent to begin with, where over 50% of our H2141 16-inch MacBook Pro repairs are devices with an SSD short at the ground. That's just not a repair that I feel comfortable doing. Essentially, not only is there a lot of work involved, I need to take the NANDs off of the donor board after getting rid of all the underfill, reball them, take the NANDs off of the customer board, get rid of the underfill properly and solder it on just so that the customer can have a device with NANDs on it that may very well last like 3 or 4 months. I don't feel comfortable with that. I wouldn't feel good offering that. I want to feel every time somebody leaves here, even if it looks like a janky repair, even if you got wires going everywhere, I want to feel like this is a work that when I'm in my retirement home, this machine is still going to be booting kind of thing. I want to have that pride in what I do. I don't feel that level of pride when I'm taking NANDs off of a donor that probably have 40 terabytes of write cycles and putting it on your computer. So these machines essentially wind up becoming junk. And I think the thing that's most important to go over here is that it's a choice to engineer it this way. It's a choice to solder the SSD onto the board. It's a choice to set up the machine in a manner where when that soldered on SSD fails, rather than just having a device without an SSD, you have a dead computer. And I'm hoping that as time goes on and as more people purchase these products and have these experiences, that they start to become a little bit more discerning and critical when purchasing these devices from manufacturers. If a device has a soldered on SSD, it would be really cool if customers started to say, you know what? Nah, I got screwed by that once, not doing that again. And I think it's really important for us to tell our customers that that's the case, that if you bought virtually any other device, you would be fine. I would be taking out an M2 SSD, that costs $50, putting one in that costs like $100, and bam, you have twice the storage, it's faster, it's amazing, and if anything goes wrong, just do the same thing again a few years from now. But I'm not, because you bought a MacBook. Because you bought a MacBook. Maybe if we do these things, things will change. Maybe consumers will start making different decisions. Maybe Apple will start making different design decisions. And maybe I'll move back to New York City and start a business there again. Then maybe it'll rain gold in my backyard. Well, that being said, figured you'd enjoy some footage of me torturing myself for about an hour. I'll edit it up, and you tell me, is your next machine going to be a machine with a soldered SSD? Let me know. Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. Today we're going to be looking at a MacBook that doesn't turn on. We're going to see if we can fix it. This over here is an A2141 MacBook. 99% of the time when this MacBook doesn't turn on, it has a dead SSD. And hopefully that's not the case today. It does 0.001, 0.09, 0.01, actually 0.1, okay, 2 amps for a quick second. Oh, the fan just spun. The fan just spun. Was this sleeping? Does this turn on already? Oh, let's see this again. Oh, this is actually probably going to be really shitty. Something tells me this is going to be really shitty. Like, turns on and then turns off, turns on and then turns off, turns on and then turns off. Yeah, okay, this is going to be shit. The funniest part of LTX for me was there was this one person that was pretending they watched my content. I forget if it was one of the sponsors of the show or something. Like one of the people with the booth. And like I had a creator badge. It's like, hey, I watch, like, oh yeah, I love your stuff. And I go, oh, cool. And he's like, yeah, what's your channel? And I'm like, really? Like you're going to be that transparent? Like I love your stuff that I don't even watch because I don't even know what your channel. Like fine, fuck it. I tell him my channel. Like, yeah, we're just trying to get some of our stuff into the hands of creators to go over and like then like I could see the first video that showed up when he searched for me was like Purism scams customers. This company scams customers, and it just kept going on and on and on like that. And he's like, oh, you know what? Never mind. I don't think. Yeah, never mind. And it was just so funny watching his face change from like this happiness of I'm going to get this YouTuber to like talk about our stuff to oh, actually, yeah. Whoopsie. As grade A under A would have said in 2015. Fuck off, mate. Otherwise, I enjoyed my time there. It was a worthwhile conference. If you are able to go at some point in the future, I suggest you give it a shot. But oh man, that was a funny one. It's like, yeah, the advertiser-friendly YouTubers are that way. This is the autistic nerd section. Okay, I'm literally going to take this board out and I'm going to look at the other side. And if there's nothing obviously physically damaged and it is boot looping, I am then going to try booting it with nothing attached besides the screen and the charge port. And if it still boot loops, then this can S my D. Again, if you wanted to do diagonal measurements on all the PCI Express lines and compare it to a known good and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah, there's, yeah, but technically, you could do all that stuff to then get a 50-50 understanding of whether the CPU or the GPU is bad that you have to transfer off of a donor board that's probably going to be in the donor pile because it has a dead CPU or GPU. We're not going to do that. Tonight I really just kind of want to work out the kinks in my streaming setup. I'm not actually expecting to fix anything or do anything fun. So if you're looking for something fun, this is not going to be the stream for you. I mainly just want to see that my streaming setup works, see if anything breaks, make sure I have all the things on my desk that I would need in order to feel like I have a functioning desk. By the way, everybody, we have board repair. We have board repair royalty in the chat today. I want everybody to say a good hello to Mr. Paul Daniels. Paul Daniels, come on down. All right, so we saw some corrosion by the SSD buck, but there's always corrosion by the SSD buck. It wouldn't be a 2141 without corrosion by the SSD buck. But you know what? You might just give that a little bit of love. I'm just going to look over the rest of the board. And remember, I'm counting on you people to tell me if you see anything wrong. Paul Daniels, the software guy? Yeah, Paul Daniels, the elite programmer. Make no mistake, Mr. Paul Daniels is an elite coder. Okay, so the only thing I see on this board that's funky is this. And this is the thing that's always funky on this board. Do you see what it is that I'm pointing to? Do you see that? Yeah, that is a nasty cap. So we have a nasty cap, SSD buck, and we got some nasty corrosion over here. So it's boot looping. And let's see if we can take a look at the schematic in the board view and get an idea what that is. By the way, for anybody curious about what software I'm using, this is Flex Board View. And I'm using version 0.1150. God only knows how old that is, but it works. So that's that. We use the software that works. And the software that works is, yeah. So this is a capacitor on PP2V5 NAND SSD. So this is going to be for powering the SSD. So if this capacitor is mildly shorted to ground or fully shorted to ground, it would keep power from going to the SSD. And then you also have corrosion over here and over here. This is going to be for a resistor over here. It looks like feedback over. This is going to be responsible over here. So the whole idea here is this chip is going to take 12 or 13 volts and turn it to 2.5 for the SSD. Now, it has to switch back and forth, like it has to be on and off, then on and off, then on and off, because the way this is going to work is it's not just going to magically take 12 volts and turn it into 2.5. What it does is it just sends a little bit of 12, a lot of 0. A little bit of 12, a lot of 0. A little bit of 12, a lot of 0. And it kind of averages its way out to 2.5. But it has to see, is it turning on too little 12 or too much 12? It has to see what is being done in output. And that's going to happen through feedback over here. Now, if these resistors are an improper value, then this little voltage divider over here that's leading to feedback might give the wrong amount, and it may either be making too much voltage or too little voltage compared to what it should be. So it says over here that this resistor that is right by the corroded area, actually, it doesn't look like the resistor is really the corroded area. It looks like, if we're being honest with ourselves here, that it's this bottom capacitor. But that cap doesn't even necessarily look bad. It doesn't look dead. It just looks like it has corrosion in the area that may be adding some capacitive crosstalk or some shit like that. That is, yeah, it's a fancy way to say it's corroded. So let's just remove it and put something that's not corroded in that area. Now, if this chip over here, that is the one that powers the SSD, this is a TPS 62180. This is U9580. If you click the PDF button on Paul Daniels' amazing software, it'll actually find that on the PDF for you, just like that. Isn't that beautiful? And if you wanted one of these chips, one of the things that you could do if you wanted to find it is you could go to store.rossmangroup.com. And unlike the Beats Tech that doesn't have it in stock, store.rossmangroup.com does have it in stock. So you're out of stock and you cost 31 more cents, but we're in stock. That's right. And of course we don't have a picture because fuck if I've updated my website in 3 years. Not like anybody buys from this thing anyway. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the TPS 62180. I'm going to remove the nasty capacitors for feedback, and I'm going to remove the nasty filtering cap on the line. And once that's completed, I'm going to replace them with a happier one, a superior one, a better one. And since the component that I'll be putting on the board will be a happier component, that also just happens to not be liquid damaged, it's actually going to work better, because happier components work better. It's one of the important things that they don't tell you in school. You got to be really fast over here because you're right next to an SSD. You don't want to heat that shit up. Good. Now that capacitor that had the schmutz near it, I think I can get away with leaving that on there. The TPS actually managed to not have any corrosion under it, so replacing this may be silly. What's wrong with this board? It boot loops. F-Jack audio for being a buggy pile of shit. And we're back. We're back. Yes. All right. So the stream died. Jack audio died. I used the studio thing. Sometimes turning it off and back on again will fix it, and sometimes that doesn't. And this is one of the times where that doesn't fix it. Such is life. Such is life. It is Linux. Expecting things to work in Linux for any sort of audio, video production is being silly. I am a crazy man. I am an anti-establishment. I want to do things my own way, blah, blah, blah. And this is what you get. You get owned. You get absolutely owned. Okay. So, we're back. Hello, Amanda. How are you? We're going to take a donor cap from a donor board. Put it on this one. Now, I'm not putting a lot of heat on that. And you may say, hey, you know, that's not soldered on right. Why are you not doing more? Well, I have to use heat to solder this BGA chip on there, and I want to limit the amount of heat that I apply to this section of the board because the NAND is right above it, and I don't want to overheat that. So if I'm going to limit the amount of heat that I'm using, that's going to fly into place just fine, as is. Here. I have my heat turned down, my air turned down. Now we're going to implement rapid cool. Started swimming more recently, so I got more lung capacity, you know? So when I blow on the board, it's not booting. Okay. Where's the operating system and that stuff stored? The SSD. What does the part that powers the SSD look like? It looks like corroded shit. Okay. You know, you gotta make some sense of things first before you just go around restoring and deleting people's shit. Not trying to be an Apple store here. 20 volts, 30 milliamps, 100 milliamps, 70 milliamps, 1.3 amps, 1.7 amps, 2 amps. Okay, we're singing a song. We're singing a song that looks like attempt to boot. This is a song that seems like attempt at booting. The fan stays on. Does it stay on longer than before, or am I tricking myself? I have a feeling that I'm fooling myself. I'm telling myself the fan is staying on longer this time when in reality it is not. But it is. It's still on. 1 amp. This fan is still on. You're doing something. You're doing something you weren't doing before. Yeah, see, this is pretty much the same behavior as before. Okay, so let's think about this. And then the fan turns off. So the fan stays on about 20 seconds, and then the fan turns off. So let's think about this. From a logical standpoint, what could cause the machine to have the fan turn on and then turn off? It's like it stays on for about 45 seconds, and then it boot loops. And the only thing that we notice on the computer is that there was some strangeness, there was some weirdness on the SSD buck converter, which we have removed the corrosion from. What would you say is the problem at that point? No, not dead right. Makes it to post and gets to the point that something is dead and restarts. Don't say no SSD, that's fucked up. Don't wish that on me. OS boot drive, yeah. Okay, so tomorrow, we're just going to pretend that that resistance number isn't an issue. And I'm going to grab a MacBook, and I'm going to do a DFU revive, and this is going to work just fine. It's going to work just fine. You shut your mouth, it's going to work. I want to hear any of your shit. If I had a MacBook, you'd see that this SSD is just fine. And if I were to keep those probes there for the next 3 hours, I would get kilo-ohms of resistance instead of 100-something on 2.5 NAND. This wasn't a full 0-ohm short, though, Paul Daniels. There's hope. Are you telling me there's a chance? So you're saying there's a chance. Today we're going to be looking at an A1990 MacBook that doesn't turn on, and we're going to see if we can fix it. Hopefully this is more fixable than the A2141. Can anybody guess what was wrong with that one? Kind of curious how good you all are at guessing things. Because if you were going to guess that that had a dead SSD, you'd probably be right. But this is the second machine. This is not going to be like that horrible first machine. Let's see what we get. So I'm going to switch over to my overhead camera over here, which could use just a little bit of adjustment. So what do we have here? So this machine looks like it is at, come on, 20 volts, 160 milliamps. So let's take this board out of the case and see if we can figure out what's wrong with it. Anybody here have a guess on what's wrong with my machine? All guesses are welcome. It is an Apple. That is the first problem. But we cannot be we can't be prejudiced against this because of how it was born. It didn't choose to be born a MacBook. Try to avoid being prejudiced against something for what it was born as. Be prejudiced against it for what it chooses to be. I don't give a fuck about Twitter. What I'm pissed off about is some of the news websites that I read that used to report on actual news now have Twitter on the front page. Like Twitter didn't pay their office rent. I don't give a fuck. Twitter's API, dude, I don't give a shit. When I'm trying to read about foreign policy or financial things, I don't give a fuck about Elon Musk's pet project or cries for attention. I just block and I move on. That place is amazing. If any of you ever come to Austin, there's a Lebanese restaurant called Kabobzi Mediterranean Grill. It's somewhere around 29th or 30th Street in Guadalupe. Oh my God. The people that say that you have to be in New York City to get good food really just, they're missing out so bad. There are so many parts of the country that have absolutely amazing food. Austin's got some pretty nice stuff. There's this one place, Arepitas in Round Rock. It's a Venezuelan restaurant, but everything there is amazing. There is Kabobzi Grill. That is Lebanese food, which is pretty cool. Every now and then there can be douchebags that are sitting there. Like there was this really, really old conservative group sitting there. And it was funny because they were talking, and they were talking in Arabic, and they didn't realize that my girlfriend understands it. And they said something along the lines of the pants she's wearing, the tight pants she's wearing, over and over again. And they started coughing and laughing to each other. And I didn't realize why she was giving this people the death stare. And she tells me outside that they were they were going over. Ew, why is there a bug in here? And they were go ranting on about her clothes and laughing and blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, just give me 1 second. She goes, what are you doing? And I said, just one moment. I walked in before we left and I said, Just can you just do me one favor? Like, if you're gonna talk about it, just do it in English so that we can all enjoy it. Like, you're like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I'm like, I know what you said, asshole. Sit down. And like, just do it in English so that I can hear it as well. Just do it in English. It'll be a much more fun conversation. Oh man. But in spite of that, sometimes there are dicks that sit there, and I get it. Like, you know, it's a old Lebanese restaurant that attracts like kind of like oldish, sometimes conservative, like really conservative old world people. Really old Italians can be like that too. Like, I remember my grandma used to smack my dad my grandpa on the head if he was watching The Honeymooners, and he was laughing. So if he was laughing watching The Honeymooners, she used to go, "Next life is for laughing. This life is for God." But she was serious. She wasn't fucking with him. Like, "Next life is for laughing. This life is for God." It's like, dude, he's watching The Honeymooners. He's a bricklayer. My grandpa sat down after like every single day working 12 to 13 hours in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, laying fucking bricks all day. He just wanted to laugh at The Honeymooners before dying in his like 50s of a artery issue. And I don't know, it's something with like that old world mentality in general. Like, oh my God, look at the pants that person is wearing. It's like, dude, they're gym tights. Like, relax. Okay, so the first thing you notice here is that this board is insanely dusty, and we can't really do much to it until we fix the dust. The other thing is, I said I couldn't reach the button to adjust the white balance in this camera, but I'm gonna stand on the chair a little bit and try, because this is actually triggering. Okay, a little bit better. I'll adjust it more and fuck with it later. That is PP bus. You're correct. PP bus being 29 ohms still is kind of oh, fuck you. Okay. 6 ohms. Okay, you're right, Paul. You're right. I was measuring the wrong spot. That was dumb. Okay, so when I measure for the right SSD, I have 6.4 ohms, but what's more important is that I have 6.4 ohms with nothing that looks bad. Like, this area is clean. I had like the teeny tiniest little bit of dust on PP bus with a green dot that barely even qualified as corrosion, which means that Paul Daniels has not called a dead SSD on one board. He has called a dead SSD on 2 boards. That's not cool. That's not fair. Okay, so here's the thing. This is not a 2141. So there's hope. In spite of Paul Daniels, there is hope, and we are not going to give up hope. Okay? So let's go over what we're going to do here. Because fuck Paul Daniels. Here's what we're going to do. So we have 6 ohms. Now, the 6 ohms could be on this side, which is the SSD side, or it could be on the chip side. If it's on the chip side, I could just replace that with a chip that's in the other room over there. So on the SSD side, I'm probably fucked because all these capacitors look fine. Not all, I didn't look at all, but you get the idea. So if I take off L9080 and L9081, this is kind of like the bridge. So right now, I don't know if this is shorted to ground or this, because I'm measuring all of it. If I take off this is the bridge between here and here. So if I take off these 2 inductors, then what I'm measuring, I can actually see, is this side shorted to ground, or is this side shorted to ground? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove that section. I'm going to remove those 2, and we're going to show you that Paul Daniels is wrong. Fuck Paul Daniels. We're going to show you that he is not correct. He is not going to sabotage me from ever having a working board repair again by having me have nothing other than dead NAND. It's a 10 ohm resistor, I guess. Yeah, it's a 10 ohm resistor. Yeah. Not amused. Keep one of those 4 caps up top. Oh man. Oh, son of a hoe. Do you see what I see? Oh, look at all the solder balls. But those aren't the SSD caps. Oh wait, that's PPOV9 SSD. So why would those caps be bad as well as the others? See, this leads me to believe it's not. Okay, so 2 power rails responsible for SSD power are shorted, probably. Okay, actually, no. Okay, so there's two different rails for SSD power that have a problem. One of them has a 6 ohm short to ground. The second one has solder balls sticking out of its capacitors. What do the 0.9 volt rail and the 2.5 volt rail have in common? They're both powering the NAND. So it's more likely here that the NAND is what's bad because the NAND is what is in common between these two things. So if it was just the NAND power rail that was bad, that wouldn't explain why the 0.9 volt rail has this around it as well. The 0.9 volt rail is one of the two rails that powers the SSD here. We have the 2.5 and the 0.9. If the 0.9 volt rail has all these little solder balls moving around, that means that most likely the NAND is shorted and it is placing a lot of tension on all of the power rails that are powering the SSD, which is why there's solder balls there, which fuck my life. We're still going to remove these inductors and perhaps that resistor just to confirm that I'm fucked. Just to confirm. This is sad. This is actually fucking sad. Fuck me. We don't get to have easy ones here, do we? That's sad that you consider that standard manufacturing balling, because that's some shit build quality right there. Okay. Move, bitch. Get off the board. Okay. Now, what do you think we're going to find? When we measure, see if there's a short circuit. Okay, so I'm going to put the black probe on ground. And the red probe is going to go over here on the SF. Fuck! And here. Oh, line. So the SSD side is 0 ohms. Are these MacBooks from Random Q? No, these are cherry picked. This is actually... Okay, so I think I know what happened. You can always replace the SSD IC. Yeah, I mean, if you're okay selling the customer that their data is gone and you're okay spending a bunch of money on a donor board that has them, that's going to have chips that have 50 terabytes of write cycles and spending an hour or two on it. No. LTX was all right, Juan. Got to meet the CEO of Framework, which is a pretty cool dude. I got to meet his marketing team. I enjoyed asking how they market things because I got to learn something. Since I don't, I wasn't really aware of what they were doing with marketing. They had the marketing team there. That was fun to shoot the shit with them. Thank you very much, Juan. Thank you. Now, you know, if this wasn't a MacBook, what you would do if your SSD died, you know what you would do? You would buy a new one, and you would unplug the SSD from your current one. But this is a MacBook.